open with a gripping cinematic snapshot. A young woman walking home from work late at night, never to be seen alive again. Tease the shocking confession that unraveled the mystery years later. This section should immediately create urgency and emotional investment. Jennifer Teague was just 18 years old when her life was cut short, but in those few years she had already left a deep mark on everyone who knew her. Born the youngest of 3 children, Jennifer grew up in Ottawa, surrounded by family who adored her. Friends often described her as warm, playful, and endlessly curious, the kind of person who could make anyone feel comfortable within minutes of meeting her. She loved the outdoors and cared deeply about the environment, even talking about one day pursuing studies in environmental protection. At the same time, she had an eye for creativity and fashion, balancing her interests with part-time jobs as she began considering what her future might hold. Life was full of possibilities, and Jennifer seemed to carry them all with her. Just weeks before her disappearance, she had adopted a kitten, a small sign of the independence she was beginning to carve out for herself. For her family, that tiny creature became a lasting symbol of Jennifer's compassion and excitement for the life she was building. Her days were busy but ordinary. School, work, time with friends, and long conversations about dreams that now will never be realized. To those around her, Jennifer wasn't just another teenager. She was someone full of potential, brimming with kindness, and ready to step into adulthood. And yet, in September of 2005, the simple routine of her life would be shattered. What started as a late shift at work and a short walk home would turn into a nightmare no one could have imagined. September 7, 2005 began like any other day for Jennifer Teague. She went to school, worked her evening shift, and spent time with friends. By the time the clock pushed past midnight, she was at a convenience store not far from home, laughing and chatting in the way teenagers often do when the world feels safe and ordinary. Around 1:30 a.m., Jennifer left the store to begin her walk home. It was a short trip, about 18 minutes on foot, one she had made countless times before. The streets were quiet, lit only by the occasional street lamp, and the cool night air carried an eerie stillness. Jennifer's friends assumed she would be home in minutes, but as she disappeared into the darkness, she unknowingly stepped into danger. Neighbors later reported hearing what sounded like a scream in the distance around the same time Jennifer should have been nearing her street. Some dismissed it as nothing unusual, while others thought it might have been just a passing argument. No one could have imagined that those fleeting seconds marked the beginning of a tragedy. When Jennifer failed to arrive home, the first signs of worry began to ripple through her family. What was supposed to be a simple, ordinary walk had stretched into a silence that grew heavier with every passing hour. By morning, it was clear. Jennifer had vanished. And this disappearance would set off one of the largest searches her community had ever seen.
The moment Jennifer was reported missing, police treated the case with urgency. This wasn't a teenager sneaking away or avoiding curfew. Her family knew something was wrong, and investigators agreed. Within hours, flyers bearing Jennifer's photo were distributed across the community, and volunteers joined officers in combing the streets, ditches, and wooded trails that lined her route home. Neighbors checked garages, sheds, and backyards, desperate for any sign of the missing 18-year-old. The search quickly grew into one of the largest the city had seen. Local media covered every development, and community members gathered nightly, holding candles and offering support to Jennifer's family. For days, there was a fragile hope that she might be found alive. Detectives, meanwhile, began their investigation with intensity. They interviewed Jennifer's coworkers, friends, and even her ex-boyfriend, searching for clues in her personal life. One man named Boris, who lived in the area and had a troubling past, briefly drew their attention. Polygraph tests and lack of evidence, however, cleared him and others under suspicion. Each promising lead seemed to crumble, leaving behind only more questions. Witness statements added to the unease. Several people claimed they had heard a scream around the time Jennifer was expected to be near her home. But without context or corroborating evidence, it was impossible to say whether it was truly her. Then, 11 days after her disappearance, an off-duty police officer made a grim discovery. Deep in the woods, near a walking trail not far from her route, lay a body. Dental records soon confirmed what everyone had feared. It was Jennifer. The cause of death couldn't be immediately determined, and with little forensic evidence, the case grew even colder. The community was devastated, investigators frustrated, and the central question remained painfully unanswered. Who had taken Jennifer's life and why?
In the weeks that followed, investigators chased every possible lead. Jennifer's case dominated headlines, and with the pressure mounting, detectives widened their scope. Rumors swirled about possible links to other unsolved crimes in the region, including the murder of a young woman named Ardith Wood just 2 years earlier. The similarities were unsettling, but careful analysis ruled out any connection. Several men from Jennifer's life were scrutinized: friends, co-workers, and acquaintances. Each time, detectives hoped they had found their suspect. But alibis held firm, polygraphs were passed, and evidence simply wasn't there. The case became a series of stops and starts, each potential breakthrough collapsing back into silence. For Jennifer's family, the uncertainty was crushing. Every knock at the door carried a flicker of hope, followed by the weight of disappointment when another lead evaporated. The community that had once gathered nightly in solidarity now found itself haunted by fear, wondering if a predator was still lurking nearby. The investigation stalled, leaving police, family, and friends caught in a web of unanswered questions. And just when it seemed the case might fade into obscurity, an unexpected figure would step forward with a confession that changed everything. For months, investigators had chased shadows. Leads went cold, suspects were cleared, and Jennifer's case seemed destined to remain unsolved. But in June of 2006, almost a year after her disappearance, an unexpected figure walked into the spotlight. His name was Kevin Davis, a 24-year-old local man who lived not far from the route Jennifer had taken that night.
One evening, under the influence of hallucinogens, Kevin confessed to killing Jennifer. At first, police were skeptical. His story seemed erratic, and confessions made while intoxicated are notoriously unreliable. Investigators questioned him carefully, looking for details only the killer would know. But his account was scattered and inconsistent. Eventually, he retracted it altogether, leaving detectives frustrated but unable to ignore the eerie possibility that he might be telling fragments of the truth. For weeks, the case seemed to return to a standstill, until Kevin Davis resurfaced. This time, he was sober. And this time, his confession was chillingly precise. He admitted that he had stalked Jennifer on her walk home, confronting her at knife point and forcing her into a secluded area. He described how he intended to sexually assault her, but panicked when she resisted. In a moment of desperation and rage, he strangled her. Kevin revealed details no outsider could have guessed: the path he took with Jennifer, the location of her true burial site, and the sequence of events that matched the timeline investigators had long struggled to piece together. When officers followed his directions, they found confirmation that erased all doubt. Kevin Davis had been telling the truth. What made his confession even more unsettling was his reasoning for coming forward. He admitted he was consumed by paranoia, convinced the police were closing in on him. In reality, investigators were far from solving the case. Kevin had essentially handed them the truth out of fear. For the first time, after months of despair and dead ends, detectives finally had their breakthrough. But for Jennifer's family, the details of that confession would reopen wounds that may never truly heal.
When Kevin Davis's second confession was confirmed, the weight of his crimes could no longer be denied. Prosecutors prepared to take the case to trial. But in January of 2008, Davis stunned the courtroom by pleading guilty to second-degree murder. There would be no lengthy trial, no jury deliberations, just a quiet but devastating acknowledgement of what he had done. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, with the possibility of parole only after 25 years. For Jennifer's family, the words life sentence brought some measure of justice, but they also carried the heavy truth that no punishment could ever restore what had been taken. Inside the courtroom, Jennifer's parents faced the man who had stolen their daughter's future. Their statements were filled with grief, but also with a determination to honor Jennifer's memory, rather than let it be defined solely by her death. Years later, her father would write a book, sharing his family's journey through loss and resilience, offering guidance to others navigating the unthinkable. The sentencing closed the legal chapter, but it could not erase the scars left behind. For the community, the case served as both a warning and a reminder. How quickly ordinary life can fracture, and how the pursuit of justice, though slow, can still bring answers. And for Jennifer's loved ones, the question was no longer about who had taken her life, but how they could carry her memory forward. Jennifer's story is a haunting reminder of how fragile safety can be. One ordinary night, a short walk home, and everything changed forever. Yet her case also reveals the relentless determination of investigators who refused to let her memory fade, and the resilience of a family who found ways to keep her spirit alive despite unimaginable loss. In the end, Jennifer Teague is remembered not only for the tragedy that claimed her life, but for the kindness, ambition, and light she brought to the world, a light her community continues to honor. If Jennifer's story moved you, consider subscribing for more true crime cold case documentaries. Share your thoughts in the comments below and help keep her memory alive by spreading awareness of her story.